Hey everyone, we want to welcome you back to theclinicaltrialsguru.com. Again, that website address is theclinicaltrialsguru.com. We've been doing this for over 2 years now. We bring you guests, experts, interviews from around the globe, literally, from different aspects of the whole clinical trials prism, if you will. We've had doctors, participants on, study coordinators. Today's guest is very special. Patrick Stone, former FDA investigator, or otherwise known as FDA Auditor. He was doing that up until last year, 2011, and now he's in business for himself. He's a consultant, does a lot of QA work with some really big names, really big players in the industry. You would recognize many of these names, Don. They're like big CROs that Patrick consults with. And on top of that, Patrick has an excellent personality. He's an author as well. Hold up that book, Patrick. Bubblegum Badge. This is the book Patrick wrote about his FDA experiences. Patrick, tell us a little bit about the book. Like, what made you want to write it? Give us some cool stories from in there. Let's start the interview off that way.
Sure, great. So I started tooling around with the idea of getting people to understand what FDA really did, how it trained its investigators and its review division, and what it takes to have, no action indicated work, official action indicated work, or voluntary action. So the different ways that FDA names its inspection classifications, some of the terminology, there's a big translational issue between industry and FDA. FDA uses all these acronyms and all this crazy language, and in the back of my book I have an acronym list so that if you see a word and you're like, hey, this isn't a word, what's wrong with this guy? Well, you go to the back of the book and you say, oh, that's a government acronym. Okay. Because you're going to see these acronyms over and over in your final disposition letters. And most of the clients that I have, when I use FDA terminology, they look at me like, what language are you speaking? Because I don't understand you. And so this is a reason why I wrote the book, because I'm hoping to bridge some of that translational gap. And it's very important. Plus, I'm giving you behind the kitchen door information about FDA, some political stuff, it should be a strictly scientific organization, but it's a government entity, so it's going to have politics. And so with politics, you're not always going to have the best scientific minds as management, okay? Because politics gets involved. So you have people that really shouldn't be running the show at FDA. They're over everything. Why? Because they're politically connected. It's that easy. Wow. So I'm giving some of these behind the kitchen door viewpoints from an internal standpoint, because there's so much external looking into FDA trying to understand it, and they miss the point, because the point has to come from someone that has done the work for more than a decade or so. Because if I was only in 5 years, I really wouldn't understand my job or what FDA does. But after being sent all over the world and training other organizations that are counterpart to FDA, then now I believe I can have a voice and I can speak for my fellow investigators and the review division in trying to be more outgoing with the public, as opposed to so tight-knit, always, you always got a poker face when you're with the FDA. And so I'm shedding that with this book. I'm doing, some changing of gears, because it is so much different in the regular industry world than it is in the government. I mean, with my clients now, they are expecting quick turnarounds on how I get to their projects and how fast I get to the reports. Whereas with FDA, you got 15, 30 days, whatever, unless it's violative. If you have a violative report, it's, you got to be pretty quick turnaround, 10 days or so. But even that's a long time. 10 days, it should only take you 3-4 days to write a report. So this is kind of, I'm kind of giving an inside look at something that has been pretty much a gated community. You know, the Great Wall of China, the Great Wall of FDA. I mean, you know, there are no other books out there like this. And so that was another thing. I'm like, hey, I'm going to be the first one to do this kind of thing. That's a good place to be.
Now, who would be interested in reading this book? Because it's been out for, what, like a few months? Or has it been out longer?
Well, no, we launched the book in July. I was preferably going for 7/7/11 or 7/11/11, but you know, I kind of was pushing the envelope because most people, it takes them a year just to write a book, and then it takes another 6 months to proof it and get everything set up. So I was pushing the envelope, but so it came out at the end of July, and we're at about 700 copies sold.
Wow,
which is pretty good. It's not bad. I mean, it's not the best.
For those of you out there watching in the time capsule, it is March 29th, 2012. So hello for those of you watching in the future. So it's only been out like what, 9 months maybe.
9 months, right? It's like a baby. It just got born.
So who's been the biggest fans of it so far? Thank you, Chris.
So I've gotten a lot of great feedback, mostly from principal investigators, MDs, PharmDs, doctors. I mean, this book really is meant for individuals that are knowledgeable with clinical trials, bioequivalence, laboratory stuff. You know, I have a lot of friends that have read the book and they're laymen and they're, you know, English majors or you know, business majors, and they're like, oh, you kind of put me to sleep, you know. I said, well, you know, you don't really have a scientific background. I know you really liked the first chapter, you kind of got lost in the second chapter, and then the last chapter you loved because you're a manager and you understand management issues. Right. But in the middle there, I lose you with the science. So, but it's mainly geared for doctors, nurses, anyone in the healthcare industry, anyone with a background in science, you know, should be able to take this and run with it.
That's what I would imagine.
CROs, sponsors, bioequivalence labs. I mean, even good laboratory practice labs. I have something for everyone in there.
Right. I mean, it makes sense because it's like, and you know, this is maybe not the right way to put it, but people look at the FDA in this industry. You know, people running research clinics or CROs. They look at the FDA as not necessarily the enemy, but definitely not their friend. So they're trying to get an insight into how the mind of this organization works, and that's just the reality of it.
The way I've always looked at it, it's almost like looking at the IRS.
Right.
You know, you don't want to. People are always, I don't want an audit by the IRS. You know, that's a bad thing. Is it a bad thing getting an audit from the FDA?
No, it's not. And it's not because everyone knows what's expected. Like with the IRS, they change the rules every year. I mean, you know, what you can deduct, what you can't. You know, the tax code it's so crazy that, you know, if you're running a business, you have to keep up with those changes. Whereas with the FDA, it's a little slower. They're a little slower. You know, the changes are a little less drastic. But the FDA investigator himself, he is not going into your place hoping for violations because it's more work for him. You know, I mean, an NAI report or, you know, something where there's no observations or no 483 is much easier to write than when there are 483 observations. You have to put in your exhibits and explain where the problems are and this type of thing. So they're really not gung-ho to get you. What they're really interested in is making sure that your patient safety is there and it's locked in, and that your source materials has data integrity. And so everyone really knows what's expected. Plus, there's contracts. Every principal investigator signs a contract with FDA and with the sponsor. So everyone's contractually bound. Whereas with IRS, I mean, yeah, you've got to put your taxes in, and everyone pays taxes. You know, death and taxes are the for sure things in this life. But whereas FDA, you know, you put yourself into that system. So you're really inviting them in. Now, are you going to get an FDA audit? Probably not. The odds are very slim to none that you actually get audited by the FDA. And I think that's slowly changing now with the ICH rules. You know, FDA is migrating more toward the EU standard, and they're going to start mandating that sponsors cannot put in their applications unless their projects have been third-party audited. So everyone needs to realize that this is coming. I mean, they're changing the way they do the drug application system with quality by design, and they're changing the way that clinical trials are audited. Now they're allowing for electronic review, and they're changing the way biosimilars are reviewed, because for too long FDA has used the CMC, or the chemical model, for approving drugs, and now they're moving more toward personalized medicine because the statistics aren't there. I mean, they're very small statistic sets, whereas with a big drug protocol, you have a lot of statistics and you can get into all the different models, and it's a chemical model. Well, that's the old way, so that is changing.
Now, Patrick, so this new review that you're saying that's coming, is that for also the clinical sites as well that are conducting the studies, CROs, pharmaceutical companies?
Yes, so the sponsor is like the pharmaceutical company, right? And
correct.
So if they're mandated to do a ICH third-party audit, but QA audit, not just monitoring, but a full-on quality assurance audit, that is taking the place of FDA, because FDA cannot be everywhere at all times.
Correct.
I mean, you have to realize that 80% of the staff at FDA are food workers. They're looking strictly at food work because that's what Congress gives money for. They give money to do food work. It's appropriated specifically for that.
Okay.
So if there isn't enough money and FDA can't be there, plus it's a small organization. I mean, 5,000 people. That's not very big to cover a whole country with, who knows how many ongoing clinical trials there are.
Right.
So they are going to be mandated, because too many times FDA gets applications and they can tell right away, wow, you already have issues here. We don't really even have to send an investigator because the review division sees the issues. And so if a third-party QA person gets in there, either you kind of want to get a system going. You want to get in there in the beginning, first month or two, in the middle, and then at the end, because if QA goes in at the end, how are you going to fix anything? I mean, so you can't solely rely on monitors to help you course correct your clinical trial. Because I see too many times where I get there after 3 years and the whole thing is done wrong. Whereas the monitor could have changed that from day one or month one, month two, but they missed the boat. So that's why you need that third party, that tertiary envelope to cover your billion-dollar or multi-million-dollar clinical trial. I mean, it's not a heavy hand to have someone like me in there 1 or 2 days. It's not a big deal.
So what you're saying then is it's better to put these systems in place so that when they get done with the study, they don't have to look at, well, you did this wrong, and that wrong. You're already QAing that stuff right from the beginning, leading Big Pharma and everybody involved in that clinical trials in the right direction.
No surprises. That's what they want. I mean, we want to take variables out of this clinical trial, not introduce them by not following the protocol or not treating your patients, as safely as possible, or not giving the SAE reports, in a very timely manner. These are basic things that still are not being followed.
Okay. Here's I'm going to ask this question is from the ground floor. One of the things that I found out with some of the PIs that I've worked with in the past is they're always more concerned about getting the FDA audit because they've enrolled too many patients, and not so much getting an FDA audit based on the quality of work that they've done. And I'm a strong believer from common sense that, I don't focus on whether you enroll too many patients. I focus on if you've done your work and you've done what you're supposed to be doing to the letter, because we get protocol, and I call that our Bible. If you follow protocol as written, even if someone came in to audit you you're okay because you covered everything that you're supposed to cover and done everything exactly as you're supposed to do it. Then what do you have to worry about? Is it true that the FDA focuses in on the numbers, or they focus more in on the quality of the work that you've done?
FDA will always focus on the statistics, okay? Because it's when you have a primary efficacy and secondary efficacy system, FDA is not, okay, let's say you have a 10-site trial, okay?
Okay.
So FDA is going to take a fraction of that. They may get to 3 of your sites, and they're going to pick the highest enrollers. Plus, they're going to pick the highest SAE reporting. Okay, so wherever you had either or, they're going to do a mix of those because everything is risk-based.
Right.
If you only had 5 subjects and you did a great job, that's not as important to the FDA as if you had 20 subjects and did a mediocre job. Because your biostatistics are coming from the bigger site. You know, it adds a lot more to the trial.
Gotcha.
So it's always going to be a risk, and that has recently come out that FDA is going to a full-blown risk-based approach for almost everything it does.
Okay.
This is valuable information for the research clinics out there, because I know at South Coast Clinical Trials, we're very good at schizophrenia studies, so we're usually high enrolling on those trials. We've never got an FDA audit so far, but I know a lot of the PIs in our space, you know, they're always concerned about that. They say, well, if there's a lot of, you know, if you enrolled too many subjects, you're opening yourself up for FDA audits, which is back to Don's point about principal investigators, you know, worried about FDA audits. So doesn't that hamper the recruitment a little bit? But I mean, I guess it does, but that's not the FDA's concern, right?
No, it's really not. And I would you know, if you want to have your principal investigators talk to me, maybe I can get a forum with them. I want to ease their mind. They have signed a contract stating they're going to follow the rules. They're going to allow FDA in at a reasonable time, you know, within their business hours. And, you know, it's more of a discussion, okay? Mm-hmm. And if they've done due diligence, then they should actually want an FDA audit, because if you have an FDA audit and you don't get a 483, then that's like a little gold star on your lapel.
Gotcha.
Okay, then you can go to other sponsors and say, hey, look, I have been audited by the FDA. I've been found compliant. Now, you can't say, hey, I've been approved by FDA or FDA loves me. But, hey, on this audit, I had no issues. And even if you have little issues, like let's say they're administrative and you know, more with the regulatory records, mm-hmm. and not like data integrity or patient safety, that's still a good thing. Because when customers see that, they're like, oh, okay, well, he has a few little things to fix, but he doesn't have major issues like these other sites or these other doctors that we're looking at that they have 43s and their data integrity is bad, and or, you know, their study got thrown out because they didn't do the protocol correctly. So it's still a good thing. I mean, PI should welcome the FDA because they have a vested interest to show that their work is above and beyond what's required.
That makes a lot of sense. I'm glad to hear that too, because that is one of the things that we've struggled with a lot of times too. And PIs, I think, if I use this term, would sandbag a lot of times bringing in more studies. Even if you have a committed enrollment, they'll look in their mind and say, well, that might be too many people. Let's not do that, you know, just for that
and
reason.
that should be the last thing on their mind, because they really should be outgoing for new treatments. You know, if it's a positive treatment, maybe it's going to benefit the patient. Plus, a lot of times, you know, individuals that get into these trials, maybe they don't have the best insurance, so maybe mm-hmm. They can't afford the health care, you know, and that's a big deal right now. I mean, the Supreme Court's looking at our health care issue and all of that, and I don't want to get into that, but I mean, there are folks out there that they do go into clinical trials and they become a patient because maybe they need that more affordable care. You know, they're not being charged so much for that.
Yeah,
And doctors should realize that, hey, I want to treat as many possible patients as possible because I want to know that this treatment is effective and it is safe. And that's an important aspect for every PI to understand, that, you know, we're trying to get effective, patient-safe products on the market. And the more individuals you bring on, the better off your numbers are going to be. The more effective the product is, the better the stats look. You know, FDA will not have a problem with that.
Right. That makes sense. I have an old saying that if you don't want to get in trouble, don't do anything wrong.
Exactly.
Yeah, trying to.
Well, and sometimes you don't know you're doing something wrong. You know, you glaze over some of the rules or the guidance, and that's where you kind of make some missteps.
Okay. Now, as an FDA auditor or inspector, as Dan referred to, if you're going out to a site, what would you look at?
Well, I always start with the regulatory records, because the monitoring will give you a good list of observations, you know, things to start with. You know, whether it's, you know, patients not meeting inclusion criteria. I mean, my main focus is always going to be patient safety.
Gotcha.
And the way I look at patient safety is, you know, were there serious adverse events reported on time? Were they given the correct amount of drug? Did they go through all of the necessary laboratory assessments to show that, you know, their bilirubin's not going through the roof, or the indicators, you know, for toxicity, they're all in the lab. That's why you do lab work. And so if you're doing these patient-safe protocol entries, then you don't have any issues with that, you know, whereas if you're not doing that, then I'm going to focus on that. And so then I start, and then after I do the regulatory review and I kind of get a bucket list per se of the possible deviations. I mean, because I can't go by what the monitors say. I have to get my own exhibits and I have to do my own groundwork to make sure that, hey, yeah, this monitor knew what they were saying when they did this deviation report of this query. So I'm looking at that, and then once I do that, I get into the patient records. And I've been asked so many times, well, what patients do you just look at an arbitrary number or, you know, random number generator? What? I say no. I look at the most vulnerable population of your site. So if you have elderly folks or you have children or minors, I'm going to key in on those individuals, because the FDA they have a different way of looking at vulnerable populations. And if there's patient safety issues with that, you are going to be in big trouble, because these individuals may be, you know, 70-year-olds, 80-year-olds, you know, our elderly folks, they can be taken advantage of very easily. And FDA makes it a point to protect those individuals. I mean, everyone gets the blanket protection, but vulnerable populations are a big aspect of review. So I'll look at that, and then I'll look at, you know, who had the most SAEs. I'll look at those guys. Normally, if you're lucky, you'll get to a square root of the amount of patients that are on the trial. You know, so if it's 20 patients, you know, you get to 6 or 7. I try to get to at least half. But if I get to a few and I see a lot of issues, then I escalate. I have to look at every single patient. So that's where it changes. Whereas now on the, you know, the third party side of things, the consultant side, most of sponsors, they only want me in there 2 days because I'm a little expensive. You know, I'm not the normal cost for a clinical trial. However, they don't understand that I'm probably the most important part of that clinical trial. My fee, per se, is nothing compared to your product on the market, or, you know, how much money you're going to make if this product is approved for use. Now, again, there are some caveats to that, because not every protocol is going to be approved. Not every product that is applied for, you know, I think the stat is like 10% or something very low.
Right.
I mean, it's a low number in the approval amount.
Yeah.
So those are my focus areas.
Now, last time we interviewed, or I interviewed you, I kind of talked about from the site level. We talked about specifics, like how does the FDA contact you if you're audited. Mm-hmm. I discovered it was by phone, not by mail, which I thought was, I would have expected the other way around. And you have about a couple of days as a research clinic to accommodate the FDA. Otherwise, they'll just show up when they want to show up anyways. So I learned a few of those kind of things. What are some things, what's some advice for the research clinics out there to have a successful FDA audit? Besides like the common sense things like have everything in order.
Okay, well, so let me go through that with you then. What I like to tell sites when I get there and I see issues, I ask them, did you use a tool to maintain your protocol? And what that means is, are you using check sheets, checklists? I mean, some people have pros and cons about checklists. I say you're not going to remember everything. And I also say that maybe that research nurse wasn't listening the day that they were trained, or maybe there's a stand-in or someone other than the clinic staff that's looking at this patient on your protocol.
It makes sense.
Well, they need that checklist. They need that tool to conduct every assessment per protocol. So that's a very important thing. Okay. Another thing that I suggest is that every clinic site or every CRO have a standard operating procedure for training the investigators, training the clinical site, and for training individuals on the Compliance Program Guide and the Code of Federal Regulations, Title 21. So that way there's a template for that as well. So no one is confused about what was expected, because I see too much of this confusion when I ask people, well, where did you get this liquid paper, and why did you think it was okay to put it on source documents? I don't know. I don't know. It was just there. Well, that's not a valid response to FDA. I mean, it just isn't. So, I mean, if you look at the Compliance Program Guide and you make a template out of that, then you're assured your sites understand exactly what's required, because there's too much of this I didn't know business. So if they have all of the information in front of them and they have it in their procedures and they've been trained on it, and somehow you have to assure that either by a test or by some sort of mock application that they know what's expected. You know what I'm saying? I mean, you have to do a little bit of testing when it comes to your CRO site. These are very basic things that you can do, but they will negate all issues, so that everyone has a 360 view of what's required and what FDA is going to look at. Because the Compliance Program Guide gives you a play-by-play list of what the FDA investigator is going to look at when he comes to your office. Mm-hmm. It gives you everything. You get the whole playbook. It's not a mystery. Okay, it's not some, oh, well, what are they going to look at? They're telling you exactly what they're going to look at through the Compliance Program Guide for clinic sites, for CROs, for bioequivalents, for GLPs. Every single program area in BIMO, or Bioresearch Monitoring, has a Compliance Program Guide. It's free, it's on the FDA website, and it's easy to access.
Mm-hmm. Now, Patrick, since our last interview, I've gotten a few questions from research sites to ask you, and they're just very simple, true or false. And Don, if you can think of any, you can ask. The first one, true or false, if you successfully if you successfully complete a sponsor audit as a clinical trial clinic, right? If you go through a sponsor audit and everything's okay, there's just minor issues, true or false, you can expect the same outcome in an FDA audit?
False.
False. Okay, and any reason for that, or is it just you
Yes,
guys?
as a matter of fact, I have just done a few. I've gone in after other folks to review a site, and so many things were missed. It's a matter of who is reviewing your work. Is it someone who thinks they're trained or may be trained, or is it a seasoned person that has, maybe done this a long time? And that's why, again, I wrote the book, because there's a lot of misconception about what you should know, what you need to know when you conduct a clinical trial, or when you're a monitor, or when you're a CRO. FDA trains you to look at every aspect of that clinical trial, and if you don't have that similar type of training, you're not going to do the same review as an FDA auditor, period. I mean, so when I go in after someone else, like I've done recently, and I give to the sponsor a bucket list of, hey, your protocol wasn't followed for any of your subjects for the whole trial. They're like, whoa, wait a minute. We had someone in there, and they said everything was fine. What are you talking about? So then I look less credible, because I'm the big bad wolf. I'm like, whoa, hey, you paid me to go look at your stuff, and I'm giving you my observations. Here's the exhibits. Here's my report. I mean, I'm turning in 60-page reports. I'm not turning in little 4 or 5-page reports.
Wow.
And I'm explaining in detail where you made the mistakes, how they were made, and at what point did they start being made. So, no, that's a very bad misconception, because it's all in the eye of the beholder. Who is actually doing that work? So if you make a blanket statement like, yeah, someone went in there, they reviewed it, and everything was fine, so when FDA comes in, it's going to be great. Well, are you sure that person that reviewed it is really knowledgeable enough to do that type of audit? Because it's very hard to train someone to do a QA audit. It's not something you just do in 2 weeks. I mean, it took me 5-6 years to really get proficient. And for the FDA to say, okay, now that you look good domestically, let's throw you out into the international world where you have less time to do the work. You got to do it in a different language, and you may be sick from traveler's disease. Who knows? Because anytime you go out of country and you eat other foods, you're going to get sick, period. So you've got a lot to deal with, when you get that meat grinder and you're out there in Timbuktu, and you can't even ask for Imodium or whatever, I mean, you're like, hey, help me out here. They're like, look, just review my audit, okay? Don't worry about your sickness. I don't care about that. I just want you to do the work. So, yeah, I mean, it takes a long time to get that situational awareness, that laser-like focus on the records to understand what the protocol says, what the work was done. I mean, it's like finding a needle in a haystack when you do this work. Right. You really are not sure you're going to find something, but you're going to look anyway.
I have a few more of these true or false, and I got.
Sure.
I think Don will have some too, but this one's silly, but it's a real one. It's true or false. The research clinic will have an easier time with the FDA audit if they buy the auditor a nice lunch, and maybe even get him intoxicated at happy hour.
False. Most FDA guys are not going to go. They're not going to take lunch from you. I mean, the FDA has rules for that type of stuff, all right? And they're mainly meant for the manila envelope that may or may not get passed to you. I was never bribed. No one ever even tried to bribe me, because that is something you have to tell your boss right away, and then it goes to Office of Criminal Investigations, and people get in trouble and all this stuff.
Yeah. Now, plus, is a lunch a bribe, or if a research clinic says, "Hey, let's get lunch"?
Okay, so it's not a bribe if you get lunch for all the staff. So if you normally buy on Thursdays or Fridays, everyone a sandwich and chips and a Coke, and you have this extra puke in there reviewing stuff, I can't say that I never took a sandwich and a Coke from a site. Hey, I'm busy, I'm doing these records or whatever. They're throwing me donuts. I mean, I've seen it all. I mean, I've seen a full spread, and I've seen nothing. Like, hey, get to work, dude. You're here. We want you in, and we want you out.
Okay.
But if you're human to them, I mean, if you bring out a personal aspect to it, a little sugar goes a lot longer than a little bit of salt. Okay, so if you're cordial up front, I mean, most FDA guys are human, and they're going to come up there with poker face, okay? They're going to be the robot, and I'm here to make sure everything's kosher, okay? But once you break down those barriers and you start really, speaking with them, then you understand, hey, this is just a regular old guy. Now, some of them will just tell you, hey, I want the records, and I don't want anyone in here. I want y'all to all go away. I'm busy. And that's just how they are. I mean, they don't want to be seen as schmoozing or but I always kind of schmoozed because I knew FDA wasn't my last stop, okay? And you don't want to step on people that may be able to help you, or you may be able to help them later, okay? And I always had that in the back of my mind that this is a customer. They might be my future customer. I may need this person, okay? Because if you're in FDA 30 years, when you get out, you're so beat and broken that it's kind of you're out to pasture already, You've already been run through the ringer too many times. And so you lose that personable aspect. And that was why I said, hey, I'm not retiring with that. I'm not going to, sit down and die after 30 years of hard labor. I'm not going to do it. I'm going to get going. Plus, there's some other things, like 5-year pay freezes for FDA, for all of government. And that should concern everyone, really. Because if you're a DEA guy or you're CIA guy or you're FBI guy, he's getting less money, and for 5 years, is he going to be a happy worker? Is he really going to be trying to really?
No, I wouldn't.
He's going to be thinking in the back of my head, I'm being kicked in the butt by my employer, and then I got this guy shooting at me. What universe am I in? Is this Twilight Zone or what? So it became a hostile environment pretty much at the end here. I mean, the government is taking out on its employees what it should be fiscally responsible for itself. Okay? It's not the workers' fault that the government doesn't understand fiscal responsibility. Okay? It's the government's fault. So when you get beat up by your employer, it might be time to make other arrangements.
Yeah.
One more true or false for me, and maybe Don has some. True or false, if an investigator and a PI is more likely to get audited if he's been audited in the past?
False.
Okay, so there's no correlation. It's just...
No, because, again, when you get audited, it's a numbers thing, like you already, kind of brought up earlier with the stats and the amount of... Now, here's the thing, though. It's not all false. Like, let's say the investigator or the PI got audited and they got a 43. Well, there's going to be a 6-month or 1-year checkup. I mean, once you get into that 43 system, you have to be re-audited. And if you get audited again and there's another 43, you're going to get a warning letter next. I mean, that's like automatic. So it's half true, half false. Okay, so, I mean, there's always a after review audit. I mean, so if you have a 43, FDA pretty much has a procedure stating that, that same PI, they've got to, within a year, they've got to be re-looked at to make sure they're back on track.
Okay, well, it makes sense. Maybe not what the research clinics wanted to hear, but it makes sense.
Okay.
Don, you got any?
I don't have any direct questions, but just to sort of recap, is that what I'm hearing is, number one, is that having an FDA audit is not a bad thing, and you went over that with this, Pat. The other good thing that I'm hearing about is that one of the things that investigational sites can do, and I hope all those that listen to this take this to mind, is that we can go on the FDA website and pull up a compliance checklist to make sure that we are staying compliant. So if we ever do have an audit, we're within the framework of where we need to be. And
and I can help you out with that. I mean, I can send you those links if you want.
Okay.
Or I even have the hard copies. You can download that as a PDF file, and I have them for every thing there. And it's not just a matter of reading it, but pulling out the most important aspects. It tells you on there what the investigator is going to look at. So that's what you want to do. And if you have a monitor or QA department, you want them to focus on those same things every time they go do their audits. Because if they're not, you're paying them for half work. Okay?
Right.
I mean, I see too many times where the monitors don't focus on primary endpoints, secondary efficacy endpoints. They're not focusing on what SAEs are new. You know, I don't really know what they're focusing on, because when I get there and it's 3 years later, and for 3 years they've let the site do the whole protocol wrong, I'm like, what were you guys getting paid for? Why did they pay you to go in twice a month, every other month, if the whole thing is done wrong? Why are you being paid?
Right.
So I can definitely help you out with that, guys.
All right.
Yeah, if you
Appreciate
could send those links, we'll put them on the blog post under this video, and all the research clinics watching can click on them, download them, and we'll have your phone number there if they want to call you, or certainly your email address.
Yeah, well, it's fine. My phone number is fine. I mean, it's my business line. You know, it's my cell phone. It's not my house phone. You know, I don't want to give that out. But
Yeah, you don't want these weirdos
yeah, so
calling you.
you know, I have an open phone policy. If you need some help, or you know, you only have a 15-minute question, if I can answer your stuff within 15 minutes, I'm not going to charge you. You know, I mean, that's just the way I do things. Now, if I got to get into the records and start reviewing things, you know, then my normal fees apply. And those fees are, you know, based on, are you a giant CRO? Are you a startup? Are you like middle of the way? Mm-hmm. What are you going to have me look at? So they're variable. You know, the rates aren't just set, hey, I make this much an hour and that's it. Mm-hmm. Because not every job is equal, and not every job is going to take as much time. And, you know, there's a lot of price sensitivity now. You know, you can't just say, hey, I want, you know, $300 an hour and that's it. I mean, people are going to be like, well, I'm not going to work with you. What's wrong with you? That's You're not a lawyer.
And what
you're not even a brain surgeon.
What better individual to have audit your site than a former FDA auditor? Mm-hmm. So
that's what I say.
It's a no-brainer. There's all these QA people out there who have never been in an auditing position. We've had some in the past, and I'd much rather have an FDA auditor or a former FDA auditor audit me if I'm going to pay someone, rather than some guy off the street who knows how to sell and sell himself, right?
There's a lot of that out there. Now, again, you want to make sure that FDA guy worked in BIMO, or, you know, worked in the field you're contracting him in, because some FDA guys, you know, they'll do maybe 3 or 4 BIMOs a year, and they'll say, hey, I know how to do this. I'm the best. Well, I'm sorry, but you're not, because, you know, there's much more to bioresearch monitoring, or BIMO, than just 3 or 4 clinic site audits a year. Right. I mean, you've got to get into bioequivalence, bioavailability, CRO, sponsor. I mean, you got to have the full 360 view. You can't just take bits and pieces and say, oh, okay, I know how to do this. This is cakewalk.
And we got to see that bubblegum badge. Like, if you're an auditor and I'm going to have you in my clinic, I'm going to say, where's your bubblegum badge? And if you don't have one, you're going right back.
There you go.
Pat, about your book, hold it up one more time so we can see it.
Sure.
I had a question. There's the book, Bubblegum Badge, and FDA, what does it say? And
FDA, his story.
Oh, okay.
It's not a history, because I'm not really giving you a history lesson. It's my story, so I'm saying his story. And my mom was like, hey, that's pretty cute. And I'm like, well, it's marketing. You know, you got to do something, because if it's not grabbing you, people aren't going to get it. You know what I'm saying? They're going to be just like glazed over. Plus, the colors, they're very specific. Mm-hmm. You know, the blue and the pink, a lot of women will, right away, all right. And the blue, the dudes are going to be like, hey, okay, well, there's a little pink in there, but I like that blue cover, because it's like a blue jean kind of thing. When you look at it, it's not just blue. It's kind of like a blue jean. It's got some white in there and stuff. But, yeah, I mean, I made base color choices so that it's like a 3D pop-out.
Correct.
Mm-hmm. And this is not my question, but we will get to my question right now. But what's the price point of that book?
Okay, so I recommend the ebook. It's $9, eco-friendly. I produced this as an ebook. I have direct links to the GAO, to OIG, to FDA. I use links instead of a bibliography. So at the end of the book, there's a website listing and links. So in the ebook, you can just point right to those, click, and you're directly where I quoted or what I took from. So that way I'm not really plagiarizing or anything. I'm giving credit to, because I even use Duke University, because my first chapter is all about food. And I have a problem with FDA not mandating genetically modified organisms on the ingredient list. Okay, right now, if you have a GMO salmon, it's just a salmon. You don't know if it's genetically modified frankenfood. So I have the first part of my book is all about food safety, food issues, radiation from Fukushima. I mean, I put the whole works in there. All kinds of things that you really aren't thinking about right now, but you should be. You should be. And you should be calling your congressman and telling him to mandate FDA get on the bandwagon and say, look, if you're going to produce this food and it's genetically modified, I need you to put that on the label. Because the lobbyists have gotten involved, and that's not a mandate. I think we have a right to know what we're eating. Even if the FDA and the Health and Human Services Secretary Sebelius gets on the court bench and says to the American public, you do not have an inherent right to any food you want to eat. And I want you to think about that. This is a public official, a political official, telling you don't have a choice. You eat what we tell you to eat, what we offer you to eat. And I think that in this free country, that is the wrong standpoint to make.
Excellent.
And this goes back to the Rawsome foods, the whole milk, the unpasteurized milk problem.
I remember
that. She got on the Congress bench stand and said, "Hey, these Americans, they don't have an inherent right to anything they want to eat or anything they choose to eat." And I'm sorry, but she's wrong. I mean, we all are free people. And we eat what we want to eat.
Excellent side point. Now, my question was, did you get any resistance from your former colleagues or anyone in the higher-ups at the FDA for writing this book?
So I dedicated this book directly to the frontline investigator. I mean, I put that on the first page of this book, that I dedicated to the investigator. Every investigator that has read this book have stood up and applauded and have, wanted to hug me and all this other stuff. Now, with management's perspective, they do not like the book because FDA is on this transparency kick right now. If you go to their website, oh, we're transparent, we're this, we're that. Well, I'm giving you more transparency than the FDA is, and they don't like that because transparency is a vague term. We want to be as transparent as we want to be, not fully transparent. To me, transparency is I want to see everything from the soup to nuts, ground floor to the highest point of your skyscraper. So, yes, there has been some pushback, but a lot of the reviewers that have read this book, because I dedicated this book to them as well, they love it. They're like, hey, you are helping us spread the patient safety, data integrity word. Because I'm not just telling you what the FDA is doing wrong or what they shouldn't, what they've have been lacking in, because anyone can tell you what the faults are. I'm putting recommendations to succeed in this clinical trial aspect, or to be actually a public health organization. Because right now it's more of the appearance of public safety is more important than actual public safety. Okay, and you can see that because when there are 90,000 ongoing clinical trials in Houston, and we get to maybe 50 or 60 of those trials, public health safety is really in that percentage. You're looking at less than 1%.
Right.
So where's the protection in that? And I've asked the higher ups these questions while I was in FDA, because all these questions that I asked them, I put them back in the book. Even if it was 5 years ago, I put it in there. And their answer to my question was, well, not every drug product or device product is going to be approved. So we don't really have to get to every single clinical trial. And I said, and my comeback was, don't those individuals that were on that clinical trial deserve to have their study reviewed as for patient safety? Doesn't FDA have an inherent need to review those clinical trials? And they're like, I didn't even get an answer. They was just like, well, I already gave you my answer. You know, you can keep asking away, but it's not going to change. And I'm like, why? Where's the logic? Where's the science?
Wow.
So no, they don't really like my brand of transparency because it's true transparency.
Right.
Gotcha. Well, I can tell you from working at the ground level. When I say ground level, I refer to the investigational sites. I appreciate everything you shared with us.
Yeah. I mean, Patrick, we got to have you, if you're okay with it, as a regular guest on our show.
At least once a month.
I have no problem with that. I mean, I would love to talk with all of your listeners and let them know that, transparency is out there and that, help is available and that you can do this right with very minimal effort. You continue to do things the way you do, but you implement a few changes, a few extra SOPs, a little bit more training, and also you qualify those individuals you allow to monitor, or you qualify those QA individuals, and you make sure that this individual really knows what they're talking about, so they need to come and look at my patient safety data. Because, when you do QA, you're looking at patient records. You're allowed into a very intimate area. People get very sensitive when you're reviewing their health records. It's a very important mindset that you have to have, that you're not joking or just willy-nilly, or you're not going back home and making jokes about, hey, I saw this, I saw that. You know what I'm saying? I mean, these are things that FDA doesn't really teach investigators, like how to review patient records where you see pictures of mastectomies or operation reports, or you see organs or insides, all these different things that you see. They don't really teach you to kind of distance yourself from that patient, because too many times when I went to MD Anderson and reviewed these cancer trials, I saw all this death. All these this patient died, these stage 4, this and that, and it really gets to you. So I think FDA really needs to train their folks to objectively review these records with compassion, but to not get too intimate, because believe me, I've spent many happy hours trying to forget the death that I've seen, because with cancer there's a lot of death, unfortunately, and it's hard to see that type of stuff, and it's hard, like physicians and nurses and physician assistants even, they're trained to review that without getting intimate, I mean, they're not going to completely wrap their arms around it because they know this patient may not be here.
Right.
Whereas with us, we look at it and we're like, wow, okay, everyone died, now what?
Yeah, we definitely need to have you on as a regular contributor. We have a regular in the cancer space. We have a regular attorney who comes on. We have a few study participants and research site manager types that come on, and we'll definitely have you come on regularly as often as you'd like to share your experiences. Now, Pat, what's your blog that people can go to?
Okay, well, so I'm with the Assurx blog group, ASSURX. So they really got me going. They started me. They interviewed me first, and then they were like, "Hey, can you just write a blog once a month, twice a month, something?" And then I also have the link that I sent you, Patrick Stone's blog. That's another blog that I have. And if you do a search, Patrick Stone, FDA, all my stuff's going to come up. Warning letters, my book stuff, my blog stuff. I think I have like 6 or 7 Google pages now of just my stuff.
Wow.
And it's pretty cool because I have a lot of warning letters. I have NDA revocations. A couple of principal investigators have been put on hold, and disqualified and these type of things. So, you know, I have a wide range. Actually, we touched on Cetero last week a little bit, and on Monday they just filed for bankruptcy. I mean, I hated to hear that, but they're gone. They're gone now, and that was my biggest case, and it was a big fraud case. And you know, Cetero didn't set out to cause fraud or to make fraud or produce fraud, but sometimes your employees, you know, they take advantage of your leniency, and you know, if you're not, you know, having them swipe a card in or key a code in, hey, okay, I'm punching in, okay, I'm punching out, and you don't have video surveillance and things like that you got to trust but verify your people, period. I mean,
Right.
you know, good people do bad things when they go to the ponies and they overshoot their mark, you know, and now they owe Big Bad Butch, who's going to break their knees, money. Well, where are they going to get that money? Well, from you, of course. You're their employer. So these type of things happen, and they're really not the company's fault. I mean, the company was fairly sound, scientifically sound. They had, you know, good procedures. Everything was done right, but they failed to account for their employees' actions.
Vicarious liability.
Yeah, I hate to see it. You know, I hope that those Cetero employees, you know, they build their own company, okay, an offshoot or something, and they value their employees, because, you know, when you don't value your employees, they kind of feel like, hey, well, I can be a rogue agent and not worry about it because I'm not valued.
Right.
So that's where the issue comes in.
A lot of fraud out there. We'd love to have you on regularly. We're going to do this now.
Absolutely.
And check out Patrick's blogs. Check out his Twitter. Definitely check out his book. There's going to be links to all of that underneath. And I wanted to end this video by saying that we are now, for the last 2 weeks, opened a research clinic and service provider profile page. So anyone out there, whether you're a research clinic, whether you're a consultant, whether you're an attorney, anything, if you're anybody involved in the clinical trial space and you want more exposure, you want potentially new customers to reach you, register for a profile page. It's only $99 for the year. It's 1/10 the cost of our closest competitor, which I will not name. And for the first 100 people that do it, they get producer credit, so you can say that you've been a producer of our shows. There's 3 so far. We've only had this for a few weeks. There's South Coast Clinical Trials, Sarah Elizabeth Siegler, and Resolve Research Solutions. We thank you very much for registering your profile pages. You'll start seeing customers noticing your brand more, and you get a shout out at the end of every single interview we do, like this one, and links to our page. So register, and we love to see you all there. Patrick, thank you very much
Thanks
for
a lot, Patrick.
coming
This is
on.
definitely enlightening. I look forward to more of it too.
Valuable information, and
Yeah.
we're going to have you on regularly if that's okay with you.
I appreciate that offer, and I appreciate your questions, because there is no question too small or too silly. I mean, you really have to answer every question. I mean, you don't want any lingering thoughts or doubts, and that's what I'm all about, spreading the word for patient safety, data integrity. I mean, that is my banner motto. I swore an oath to protect the health of the public, and I will never rescind that oath. I am still held bound to my oath. And, you know, again, as far as background checks and all that, I mean, FDA put a probe up every one of our butts. So we are certified either, you know, they look at your bank statements, your credit cards. If you have bad credit, you're not going to get hired by the FDA. Because they give you the keys to the kingdom. You get a government card. So, you know, I have a fairly pristine background, no criminal history whatsoever. So, you know, I want to keep my integrity and keep that level of operations to a high standard.
Cool.
Excellent. And we thank you guys for watching, and stay tuned for many more interviews with Patrick Stone, former FDA Auditor. And we thank you for watching the clinicaltrialsguru.com. Take care.